Dr. Van Leer, 24 hours before our applications close. Do they close at midnight for the options program?
No, they close at 4 p.m.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, so I reached out to all middle schools this week and said, please communicate with families that 4 p.m. is the deadline because we always have families that contact me at 5 p.m.
Hmm.
in a panic. But I didn't get any confirmation whether that actually went out, so I think I'm going to try again tomorrow just to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to give everyone just one more minute.
Hey, Steph, are we going to do introductions?
Sorry, who was that?
That was Jody. Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
We can. Do you
At
want
some
to do
point.
them today?
Yeah, at some point, just to get names,
Okay.
you know.
Oh, yes, especially in the chat, if you could enter, because I see
Right.
a lot
We could
of
do that. Yeah.
new names. If you can share your name, your child's grade, and Jody, was there something else? We need full name, right? Ideally.
I'll just, yeah, especially if your Zoom screen doesn't say what your name is, just so I know who's here, just so we can get everybody accounted for.
And grade if you can.
Yeah,
That's helpful
what
too.
grade your kiddo is in.
Okay, and I'm gonna get us started while we drop our intros. I'm sure we'll have other folks joining us in a bit. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We have two special guests. We have our school board member, Miranda Turner, who's our school board liaison, and we have Mrs. Magro, who leads our career counseling and DE work, and they will be our special guests today. I'm hoping to get through our Arlington Tech business by about 8:20. So we have about 20 minutes for each of our presenters, or we can just make sure we have enough time for Q&A as well. So our agenda today, we will walk through our treasure update. We'll give an update on our exciting clubs and activities grants. We'll have an update from Dr. Van Leer. We have Heidi, who's been working on 10th grade planned activities, and Carrie, who's been working on 12th grade planned activities, who will share some of their updates. Some exciting work from the Teacher and Staff Appreciation Committee that's meeting again this week. We have, like I shared, our two special guests. I'll turn it over to Josh to give us his treasurer's update.
Hi, everybody. Not much of a change from last month. A couple of reimbursements have gone out. We're still looking ahead of plan for the school year to carry over $4,000 plus a little bit more. I think that 589 might have been updated, but anyway, if anybody's interested in more details, I'm always happy to share. You can send an email to treasurer@arlingtontech.org. I generally don't go over line by line, but things are pretty stable and pretty quiet until we start to outlay a lot more of the money for staff appreciation and some of the student activities and senior activities, which I think is coming up on the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
So you don't see this reflected in the budget just yet because all these grants haven't been spent out, but we've awarded about $3,150 in grants to 13 clubs so far this year. The list of the clubs are on the left. I believe previously in previous years, the most we've granted are 5 grants to 5 clubs. So this is a nice increase. We capped the amount at about $250 max for each club to help us spread it out and to give to more clubs. And it's pretty exciting. We have 1 or 2 clubs who send a request every week or two. And so they know that we're here and that we're here to support them. So that's wonderful. I will just highlight one of the requests that came in from the archery club. We gave them extra points for including the photo of an injury. Apparently, arm guards are very important and make a very big difference for them. So they put together a great presentation and requested $250 to help buy more arm guards and finger tabs. And we, of course, approved immediately. So very excited for our archery club. I will turn it over to Dr. Van Leer for her update.
Hi, everybody. So some things that have happened recently. We had the freshman cornerstone launch before break, actually, but I wanted to tell you that today, this year's focus is about improving the commute to ACC, whether that is through buses or walking or trails. So in all of the freshman classes, they're asking the question of how you can create and a commute that's more impactful for students. And we're working with Columbia Pike and the government, or I'm sorry, and the county board about trails and ecosystems and public art and lots of great topics like that. Our Latin students did a great job at state convention. That includes some students from APS, but the majority of the students there were Arlington Tech students, and our teacher Liz Gephardt brought them to the convention, and we had a lot of people place in the competitions. Jerry Mascaloni earned a national award for teaching math and science, which was big. Each state could have two nominations, so two teachers, and I'm sorry, two winners. So two teachers in Virginia won, and Jerry was one of them, and we were really proud of that. She also heads out for her Fulbright. She has a Fulbright for the next couple months in Singapore, where she's studying instruction, math instruction in Singapore, and will be coming back with that, and with a lot of plans to do presentations and to incorporate what she learns into Arlington Tech, which is great. And then also Ryan Miller. Ryan Miller is very active with NASA. His most recent accolade is that he's participating in a climate change research initiative that will be going on for the next week. He's also done a lot of work to get Arlington Tech seniors. He has 4 or 5 seniors that are part of his capstone, and they are working on research projects that are connected to NASA as well. So he's doing a lot of work with that. Thanks, Steph. Next. I just want to put some things on people's radar. The first is we are in the season now of academic planning for the next school year. So students might be coming to you with questions, or your students might be coming to you with questions about what they should be doing for next year. We put a lot of work into making sure students get information. We want students to make really informed decisions during this academic planning period so that we can lessen any kind of schedule changes in the fall. It's much better to make good decisions now than have to make changes later on. So a couple of things to know: that there will be presentations to the whole grade on February 3rd, 4th, and January 29th. So that's coming up. And then counselors from there on will hold one-on-one meetings with each student from February 5th to the 16th. Tomorrow, all the electives will be in the lunches, so that students can walk around and see all the electives opportunities that are there for them. Last week, we did a DE fair that was mostly focused on academic classes, so students could come down and talk to teachers about DE options for their academic classes. Even if your student missed that opportunity, they should still feel free to reach out to teachers and talk to them about what DE classes are like. So if they're trying to decide between standard classes and DE classes, all the teachers are happy to talk about what the differences are. The other thing I want to point out is that the Pupatella fundraiser is going on January 28th. This is for senior fundraiser in order to be able to help with the cost of some of the senior activities. It's all day. It's order in or take out. You just have to tell them when you order that this is for the Arlington Career Center fundraiser. You can say Arlington Tech or Arlington Career Center. And then last but not least, yes, applications, Steph already said this once, applications close tomorrow. We're over 300 applicants. And one change is that they increased the size of the freshman class. So we are going to offer 150 seats for the 9th grade class. And the other thing that is a change this year is that we are we have a very small amount of 11th grade seats that we're going to add this year that we have applicants for. So those are two changes. They were kind of last minute changes, but we'll see how that goes for this application cycle. I do have one more thing that I wanted to throw out, and this was a very late ask, but I just want the team to know about this. Um, uh, the science fair is coming up next month. I can't remember exactly what date. I'm going to be sending out an ask. We're looking for science fair judges. And so that will come out in an email. We'll have a form that will ask if anybody's interested in judging the science fair. And so if you are interested in doing that, just be on the lookout for an email that will come out either tomorrow or on Monday, probably on Monday. And then last but not least, we had a very late ask. They were asking if there were any funds available for being able to offer breakfast food to the people who volunteer to be judges. And that's not something that they had asked before. So I wanted to just throw that out as a question for you all, if that's something that ATAC could support.
Dr. Miller, you had a question in the chat from Heidi. If we missed the academic planning night presentation, is there a recording that can be accessed?
I'm sure there is. I'm not sure what that is. So let me find out what that is and I will email you tomorrow with it, okay?
Okay. I think it was the academic planning night that happened virtually on Teams on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was on Tuesday. That's what I'm trying to ask about. Sorry if that was unclear.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sure there is. I just haven't followed up or heard about it. So let me find out.
I was super late to it, and I want to say, because I came in at the last 5 minutes, and I think I came in and I heard that they said it would be recorded because I was glad that they said that because I was so late to it. So I'm pretty sure they said that. I
Well,
don't know, but I don't know where that recording is my problem. So
that's the important thing.
that's the important part.
I would think that they're going to post it on if they haven't already, on the counselor's website. You can get to it either through the Arlington Tech website or through ACC's website. So I'm going to assume that it's on the counselor's page, but I'm not sure and I haven't checked. So let me find that out and then I'll be sure to email tomorrow with an update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another question, Dr. Van Leer, around how many rising 11th graders do we have, and do we know how many 11th grade seats are being added?
10 seats are available, and we've had, I think, 6 or 7 applications.
We have another question around the electives fair.
Yeah, I see. So they won't redo the electives fair, but he can talk to his counselor about all the electives. The counselors have done a lot of work to put together a lot of information about all the electives that are available. And so the counselors will walk through all of those with students when they have their one-on-ones.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Van Leer. Any final questions for Dr. Van Leer before we continue? Okay, great. And another shout out to Dr. Van Leer for our new Arlington Tech website that's live. Very exciting. If you know anyone who's interested in applying, please remind them to apply by tomorrow at 4 p.m. And you can send them to our website that has a pretty lengthy FAQ. We don't want students and families to be making this decision without being informed about what makes Arlington Tech special. So appreciate everyone's help getting the word out. And now for 9th to 12th grade activities for folks on the call who may not know, we have grade liaisons for each of the grades and a budget that has been allocated to each of the grades to host activities between now and the end of the school year. and a number of liaisons have gotten started planning some of the activities, and we have a call tomorrow to plan with a few additional grades. Heidi is ahead of all of us and has pulled the 10th graders and pulled together some of their planned activities. Heidi, do you want to give us an update?
Sure. And shout out to Stephanie for the beautiful artwork, the beautiful cookies and skates to help make my conversation a little bit more enticing. So yeah, we did a survey to all the 10th graders and got some really great ideas of activities that they're interested in and what would resonate. And so we have planned a few activities, and I actually have kind of popped them in the chat. I'm gonna just give them to you. And I just would love if you're a 10th grade parent, think about saving the date, particularly for the second one. So the first thing we're gonna do is on Valentine's Day, we'll be decorating cookies. I am not sure that the students' cookies will look quite as beautiful as these cookies, but we will have some probably heart-shaped cookies and sprinkles or whatever, and we'll have students come out, I think, during Archers and just have a little something. The idea behind these activities is to give the 10th graders a little bit more of a sense of identity, sort of bring them together. And so we're hoping that doing things like this can really work in that process. The next thing we're going to do is, I think, on April 5th. So put it on your calendar now, April 5th. Many of you have been to Thomas Jefferson. There's skate nights. It's not very much money. I will have to check. It's maybe like $3 to $5 to get in. And you can go roller skating around. We're just going to do a meetup. So we will have some snacks and drinks for students to do. We invite families as well. So bring your young ones, bring your old ones, bring yourself, come chat with other parents and guardians and just kind of get to know our community, and hopefully the 10th graders will be skating around, and we're excited about that. We're also going to do sort of a service craft project. We'll announce some of the details of that as it's finalized, and we'll do another snack attack in June. So as we get to June, it may be popsicles if we're feeling less ambitious. If we're feeling like go get it and we have a lot of extra money, it may be snow cones. But we'll do something to just kind of make June a little bit sweeter. And then the last thing I wanted to say is we've also been thinking about, would 10th grade parents or caregivers be interested in doing kind of an informal meetup? And so I thought maybe I would just open my house and put out a few dates, and people can come by and have a drink, have a cup of coffee, have some water, whatever you want. But I'm going to put in the chat 3 different possible dates: March 3rd, 10th, or 11th. If you're a 10th grade parent and you would want to come, will you just say which one of those 3 dates would work best for you? And we will just crowdsource that information. And if nobody responds, then I'll just choose the one that works best for me. So make your voice heard. But we're really excited to sort of bring the 10th grade class together a little bit more this year. That's all.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for your leadership on this and for getting all the input from the students and the families. It's very exciting. And I think just for other folks that know, traditionally we have had end of school year activities for each grade that have been sponsored by ATAC. So this is one of the first years where we would be doing activities throughout the year. And I think lots of parents and families have been requesting this. So again, thank you, Heidi.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm excited to do it. And I will also say that, we're already starting to get parents say, oh, I would be interested in volunteering. So if that's you and you haven't been in touch, please, drop me a message in the chat, or, I'll drop my email in there, and feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you involved.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, our 12th grade liaison.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's crazy that it's already January, end of January. So we have a few events coming up. Dr. Van Laer mentioned our first dining out fundraiser next week at Pupatella, which is really exciting. The seniors are working on additional upcoming dining outs to help reduce the cost of prom and their senior trip. Prom is on May 29th. It's a Thursday night. The venue is less expensive on a Thursday evening than on a weekend. We haven't signed the contract yet, as far as I know, but it will be at the Torpedo Factory. The theme is Greek mythology. So it'll be from 7 to 10 p.m. and they're looking at about 100 attendees. So working on a few other logistics for that, and we'll get to the cost reduction as well. And then the senior trip will be on the 27th, so it'll be a big week, and that will be to the Busch Gardens trip, and that's looking at around $90 a person. Dr. Van Laer and Stephanie and I talked about creating scholarships for seniors to help those who want to attend some of these events and some other events that the senior committee creates to make it more accessible to everybody. So I don't know, is that on the website, Dr. Van Laer, or is that still in production?
That is going out in an email to seniors, and it's still in production. It's
okay, awesome. I looked on the website, but I was like, maybe I'm not looking on the right spot. But okay, great. So we're looking at ways to make these kind of big milestone activities, senior activities, more accessible for everybody. So that's what we have in the pipeline. And then graduation is on the 3rd at Wakefield. Excuse me. And that those are the big upcoming events. More to follow on the dining out fundraisers.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Sure.
And the students planned a really successful Techtastic in December that was led by our seniors as well. So everyone's super excited. I'm going to just give a very quick update on teacher and staff appreciation so we can get to Miranda. We celebrated Virginia School Principals Appreciation. We sent some desserts and some flowers to Ms. Chung about 2 weeks ago, so between January 13th and the 18th. Our next milestone date is National School Counseling Week. We're going to be sending some pastries and breakfast to the counseling suite and for the staff to enjoy with them. And we'll also be providing them some small gift cards. These are the future dates that we will be working on. The Teacher Appreciation Week committee is meeting tomorrow as well. And we are excited for some plans that we're working on. And so we'll give an update during our next meeting. And now I'm going to turn it over to, before I go, we have Dawn asked a question. Carrie, there's a question about how much money we're looking to collect for support senior activities. I don't know if we have an exact number.
Sorry, I was looking to go off mute. We don't have an exact number of how much we are looking to collect, but anything we can do to help supplement prom, especially, and then any scholarships. So our prom budget is pretty tight, especially so we're renting the venue, and then for food and beverage and some of the other costs that go along with that. The photographer and the DJ are pretty inexpensive, but the food and beverage is how can you make a contribution? Oh, thank you. Can we create that, Dr. Van Laer, on the website, on the senior website, like make a donation? Would that be possible?
Yeah. I
I
can put
think
up.
they
Thank you.
did create a link. I think it went out in one of their last email messages. Maybe the one that has the dinner might have a link because they talked about it last time we were there in
Yes.
person. So I think the link exists. We can definitely add it to the 12th grade page.
Yeah, I think that would be great, just so it's visible.
Dawn, thank you for your question, and we'll get that up on the website tomorrow.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Miranda now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Miranda Turner, and I am one of your 5 school board members. I'm also a Commanders fan, so I've been wearing this all week, and I hope you'll forgive me for not dressing a little bit more formally to appear before you all. I also did not prepare slides, but I see that Stephanie handled that for me, so I appreciate that. That's some of my background from my website when I ran for school board, and a much better picture of me. So thank you for that, Stephanie. So I don't have a set agenda per se, and I'd be glad to take any questions, but there are a couple of things that I thought are probably salient to most folks that I can run through in terms of big events that the school board or big initiatives that the school board is taking on. Obviously, last fall, we spent a lot of time on the cell phone policy. And now that we have voted on that and approved it, it's being rolled out in all of our schools. Hopefully it's going well. I was very supportive of it. And, any thoughts on how it's going would always be appreciated. Now that that's behind us, we're turning most of our focus for this spring towards the budget. And I will say a few things about how the process is going to go this year, because it's a little bit different than in years past for anyone who has followed the normal cycle in the past. Before I jump into budget, though, there are 2 things this week that are pretty significant current events, and I just want to mention them. In the event anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to take them. One, obviously, we've had a new president inaugurated, and there have been some headlines with respect to some executive orders and some new approaches to certain enforcement opportunities that the president may be taking. We are definitely aware of some of the immigration-related issues that are arising. We are taking it very seriously. We are working on training for our staff so that they're prepared and know how to respond to the extent anything arises. We've seen reports of, agents maybe trying to access schools, potentially even bus stops, and things of that nature. So I want everyone to know that we are, seeing the same things that you all are probably seeing in the news, and we are doing our best to prepare our staff. And our policy is that we won't let access to our schools absent the appropriate legal process. And our principals have been contacted and been able to discuss, how they can contact our legal team and central office. And so that is something that that we are trying to prepare for as best we can. The second thing, you may have seen an article in Earl Now with respect to a convicted sex offender who accessed one of our pools before, my understanding is, anyone knew that he was in fact a sex offender. Subsequently, he was barred from the premises. Obviously, he is not supposed to be anywhere near a community center, a playground, a pool, a school, any of that. And Dr. Duran issued a statement yesterday that should be in everybody's email if you're signed up for School Talk Communications. So I don't know that I've got much to add beyond what Dr. Duran said out there, but I wanted to make sure that I nodded towards that also because it's been in the news. So I'll keep going, but those things are totally open for question if anyone has questions at the end. The things I wanted to touch on with the budget are just generally about process and about what to expect. So often in the past, our budget cycle has been that the superintendent will propose his budget to the school board, and he will present it often in February, and then the school board will receive feedback from the community. The school board will analyze it ourselves, often we will make recommendations. Well, we won't make recommendations. We will desire changes, either additions based on things we think are important, possibly cuts. And the result of that process, including the feedback from the community, is that then the school board will propose its own budget. And then there will be more input from the community, and we eventually get to a final budget that the school board votes on. And often that vote has to be delayed because a meaningful portion of our budget comes from the state. And if the state has not sorted its budget, then sometimes we have to wait. So that's the typical process. That's the process we went through last year. This year, we're doing things a little bit differently. This year, Dr. Duran and the school board will present on March 13th a joint budget. Dr. Duran will actually do the presenting, but it will reflect effort by the school board in conjunction with the staff working since July of last year together to try to come to a budget that we all support. And we think it's important that we all put our support behind this piece of work because this year is going to be a very challenging budget year. We have a pretty significant deficit. I can talk about some of the reasons that that deficit exists. It's very complicated, but it is at least tens of millions of dollars. Obviously, it depends on the choices we make, in particular around compensation. But we are looking at a shortfall of some $30 to $40 million. And it could be more than that, just depending on, again, what comes from the county, from the state, and what choices we make with respect to compensation. And I will also say that the deficit is, it's an ongoing problem. It's structural in nature. We are underfunded by the state. And so we are likely to have maybe not as severe issues next year, but we will likely still have a deficit again next year when we come to this time of year. So I guess the takeaways, and I can get into specifics, although before it has been presented, I'm going to be hesitant to say much because no final decisions have been made. But I think the point is we are going to have to make some difficult decisions. I think there's opportunity in some of the difficult decisions that will need to be made. Sometimes when you step back and take a look at things, you can find ways to generate efficiencies or simply do things in a different way, or even decide that a prior effort is no longer consistent with where we want our priorities to be. And we can actually make things change for the better in some ways. But you know, that's not going to be the whole picture. There are going to be cuts that we will have to make. And it's going to be a real challenge, I think, for us to, do that in a way that the community is comfortable with. And for that reason, we are spending a lot of time working together as superintendent and the school board to really look at everything. We've also brought in a consultant so that we can have an outside perspective as well. And the last thing I'll say about that is working with the consultant has been obviously helpful on the substance, but they have this lens into what's happening across the country. And while APS has, our own unique circumstances and challenges, we are not alone in facing pretty meaningful shortfalls in our budget. And I think it's probably reflective of maybe not nationwide, maybe not everywhere, but underfunding of public education and increased needs by our students, and a lot of efforts by our public school system. I know that this is true for APS to try to meet a lot of student needs that may be a wider range of needs with our relatively recent but increased focus on mental health, on support, and a complex student population as well. In particular, here we have a large number of English learners, and all of those things are changes to our student population. We want to address them equitably and make sure that education is rigorous and high quality. And we also wanted to make sure we take care of our staff. Those things are expensive. They may have gotten more expensive over generations, and it is a challenge that's being faced across the country by a lot of school divisions, and declining enrollment, which is another thing I'm sure you've seen in the news in other school divisions. It's something that has happened to some extent in Arlington too. So those are the things I wanted to share. It's probably the most useful if I just stop talking and let anyone ask questions. If you have them, I'd be glad to do the best I can.
Thank you, Miranda. If anyone wants to jump in with any questions or drop them in the chat, please feel free.
Could you just share, I really haven't followed, could you just share if there is a sort of simple way to explain was the shortfall, like, do we know last year that there was going to be a shortfall this year? Okay. And just give us a little bit of flavor of that.
Absolutely. So I would say one significant driver is compensation. We have a very large budget, and 80% of it, which is a very large percentage, is personnel, salary, benefits. So it's a challenge when you want to, and I have prioritized this as a school board to make sure that we give our teachers a step every year, which is sort of the annual bump rate, and give a fair COLA, cost of living increase. So when you turn that COLA dial even a little bit, because there are so many teachers, staff, personnel, and so little else in the budget, it tends to have an outsized impact. For some number of years before my tenure, certainly before anyone on the current board's tenure, it was not always the policy of the school board to give a step every year necessarily, or to give a COLA or a COLA that sort of matched where the Social Security index was. In more recent years, because of that, I think we found ourselves a little bit behind the market with respect to teacher comp, which of course means we may not be able to recruit and retain consistent with our neighbors. And Dr. Duran made a pretty strong recommendation that it was important to catch up. We had a lot of reserves at the time, one-time funds that had been carryover. COVID left us with a very large reserve, actually, because we wound up not spending money on things we normally would have. And much of that reserve was used to fund compensation increases for our teachers. Of course, when you use one-time funds to fund ongoing costs, you will eventually run out of the one-time funds and you will still have the ongoing costs. So I think that just as a matter of fact is what happened. And it was in service of the desire to treat our teachers and our staff as we would want to with respect to compensation, and to ensure that we were able to attract high quality staff. So that's a huge driver. There are obviously other issues, and I mentioned some of them, including the complex needs of our student population. We do have a lot of English learners here. We have a lot of students who come to us lacking in formal education at all. And we have other needs, and we are underfunded by the state. The state of Virginia is, I think, very behind in funding generally. And there was a report called the JLARC report within the last couple of years that identified that if we as a state funded education as it ought to be, with respect to all the things we think are appropriate to a high quality education, I think APS would receive 25 million plus more than we do from the state right now, which is, it's not all of our deficit, but it's a big piece.
Thank you, Miranda. And we have a question from Jesse. Jesse, did you want to ask your question of?
Sure.
Ask it of Miranda.
Yeah. And I may be incorrect, so pardon me in advance. So as I understand, because Arlington Tech is not considered a high school, there are certain things that are different for Arlington Tech than for other high schools. And one of those, which we're looking at is having an activities line within the budget and even an activities director, such as the other high schools. And this really impacts some of the extracurricular or the clubs that the students have, and that they don't receive funding. All of the funding that they, or any funds that they get, is really through parents or them raising it themselves, which can be quite difficult. So I was really wondering for guidance on how we can change that, because as we're growing, as we get the new school, there will be more students, bigger need for providing activities that other schools also provide. So wanting your thoughts on how to get some eyesight or change in that area.
Yeah, it's a good question. I am familiar with the program versus school distinction, and I hate to lead with this, but it is a really challenging time for us to add personnel and staff and FTEs, even though I think what you are identifying is an important part of any school community, be it a program or a comprehensive high school. I do think the opportunity with the new building and some of the changes that will be coming in connection with that, and the efforts to sort of build out, call it a little bit of an identity, maybe, is an opportunity there. It's obviously a little bit of an equity issue. So I think people are open to it. It is a very fundamental issue of not necessarily having the money for it. And I know that there are, ways where you can allocate different amounts that may be earmarked for this, but you're going to use it for that. You have a school operating budget at the end of the day, and you just need to fit within that. That said, I'm a big fan of identifying what the needs are and making sure we try to meet them, and not sort of moving amounts around that are nominally this, but in reality that. And I think an activities director is one that maybe you might be able to find the funds for, but we really ought to consider what the needs are for all of our students with respect to not just academics, but how the school community grows, and how things like that are how outside interests are supported. So it's not a great answer, and I do think it's unfortunate that we're currently in the situation we are with the budget, but I hear what you're saying.
And Brenda, I have a question for a parent who knows that a budget thing is happening, but doesn't read it and doesn't pay attention, but really cares about Arlington Tech and the Arlington Career Center. Are there suggestions that you have for what we should pay attention to or where we should focus? And then what are the best vehicles for us to provide you feedback or provide the school board feedback that might actually have an impact? What are some of the best suggestions you have for that?
Yeah, so let me the most recent email from Dr. Duran that went out, I'm trying to find it. It had an infographic, because we are trying to one, sort of distill a lot of important information in a more accessible way, and two, sort of push it out over and over and over again, because you can't necessarily tell folks once and expect that it will filter through all of the many communications just from APS alone. So I would say, I wish I could find that thing.
And we can find it, Miranda, and share it. I definitely saw it.
You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
It came yesterday or the day before.
That is correct, I believe. So I would say in the fall, the school board had a number of community meetings and met with groups of parents, the NAACP, ASHPA. I'm trying to think of other examples. And that was a way for us to get feedback. I think what we're doing right now could potentially be it, right? An interested school community speaking with their liaison would be effective. Speaking at public comment is effective. An email is just as good, I would say. And we are going to be soliciting actual, there's a timeline. Oh, I found it. Yay. Okay, here we go. There is an actual timeline for this. And I would say it's going to start moving towards more substance pretty soon. So what we're doing right now is trying to get to the point of being able to propose this budget. The presentation is on March 13th. And following March 13th, there's always an opportunity for anybody to just email the school board. You can email me personally, you can email school.board and we'll get it. You can set up a meeting with anyone. There is a public hearing on April 3rd, which is our opportunity to hear from anyone who would like to come in person and speak to the school board. It's the only business that we take up that day. And anyone who wants to speak to their particular interest will have time to do that. It's a 2-minute time slot. So again, I would suggest an email is often just as effective and might give you more than 2 minutes. I would not wait to April 3rd. If you're interested in starting to make your viewpoint known or have specific asks, I would say the sooner you can get those over to us, the better, because it will just give more time for consideration. In a year like this, any ads are going to need to be offset for the most part by subtracts. Another opportunity, which is not a source of comment or input from the public, but could give you an idea of how the school board is thinking about things, are these budget work sessions, which are less formal than a real meeting. They're taking place on March 25th and April 3rd. Anyone can come. And they are an opportunity, like I said, to sort of observe more, not casual or informal, but more in-depth discussion on particular issues. And then I put the link into the chat. If you scroll down, the infographic is towards the bottom. It says that the budget will be adopted on May 1. I suspect that that deadline could, or that date could get moved again because we'll need to know what the state is going to do. But I would just encourage interested individuals to probably set up a meeting and do it as early as possible because, a lot of the work will get done and a lot of the analysis will be conducted before we approach the vote so that we are prepared to, vote up or down on a set proposal, as opposed to having it be, complex and confusing on the day of the vote. Is that helpful?
That's super helpful. And we'll share these dates in our notes and follow up to the meeting. And we'll provide all of these links so everyone has them.
Okay. And I would encourage you all also, I would encourage anyone interested to read the budget direction, which is, I think it's linked in the website that I put in, and it is a little bit of an indication of how the superintendent and school board were thinking about, it is a school board document, but we always take input from the superintendent. It's how the school board directed the super to approach the budget based on what we think are important values. Number one is to align with our new strategic plan. Number two is to focus on our staff. And we have a couple of bullet points that also put some specifics around how we think the budget should be presented, the justification for any requested increase, principles around the use of reserves and how we approach these questions. So we put a lot of work into it. It's reasonably robust. So it could give you some insight into the challenges that we're facing and also the priorities that we wanted to set.
Thank you so much, Miranda. This is super, super helpful. Thank you for taking the time and inviting us to be a part of this process. I think it's really important, and we appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing. Any final questions before we transition?
Well, you guys know where to find me. I have a website. So I appreciate you all having me. I hope this was helpful. And thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to learn more about Arlington Tech and to be your liaison.
Thank you so much, Miranda. And you're welcome to stay. I know we are at time. We are now going to have our special guest, Mrs. Magro, join us. I know we are close to 9 o'clock. For those of you who can join us, I hope you will and are able to stay. As a 12th grade parent, I adore Mrs. Magro, and I'm so excited that she's joining us this evening. I also stole her photo from the World Wide Web. And so I will let you introduce yourself now, Miss Magro, and I'll work the slides for you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Deirdre Magro. I am the NOVA counselor and career coach assigned to Arlington Tech, which basically means that I'm employed by NOVA, but work with the students at Arlington Tech and in the APS high schools. So I'm here to help people with dual enrollment from start to finish. And then once we get done with the students, if they choose to go to NOVA, I have a colleague on the Alexandria campus that starts coming in January, working with those kids to transition over to campus classes if they're interested. I work with the students as they start to move on to four-year schools or other programs once they're done. So my main job is to kind of start them with dual enrollment, help them navigate dual enrollment, and look at opportunities both at Arlington Tech and in the early online college and some other programs that we discuss to be able to really make the most of being at Arlington Tech, being a dual enrollment partner school, and kind of seeing what opportunities they'll present. So if we can move to the next slide, I put some slides together just about the program, and then we'll kind of go through 9th through 12th to see what families can do to support their students as they start and continue through this process. So as a contract dual enrollment student, those are classes that are offered on site at the high schools. Now in Arlington, they're most primarily offered at Arlington Tech, but we are seeing some growth at the base schools as well as they start to develop curriculum and as their teachers begin to be certified to be dual enrollment instructors. And what we see happening is that if a teacher is credentialed to be a DE instructor, they can teach on campus as well as with us here in APS. So really important to see that the students are being taught by a college faculty member as well as someone who is qualified to teach high school. So it's really the best of both worlds for those students. Most of our classes are designed for juniors and seniors. When dual enrollment was first created, that was the target population. But as we've grown and as students are really bringing in a wider variety of interest and experience, we have started to look at freshmen and sophomores as well. And they do have to go through a special exception process for that. So, for example, if a junior wants to take, let's say, computer programming 1, that student would need to have a 3.0 GPA. A freshman or sophomore interested in the same course would need to have a 3.25. So it's a little bit higher GPA required and a little bit closer look at that student's transcript to make sure they're ready to take a college class at that young age. But again, as we're expanding, we're seeing more opportunities and hopefully more students will start the DE process as they're entering high school so that when they're done, they have a really high percentage of looking at a degree or certificate upon the high school graduation. Right now, the classes are offered free of charge, which is huge. Materials at this point for the classes on our high school campuses have free materials with them. Now, as we talk about some other programs, there will be fees along the way for that, but everything that's offered in the buildings in APS is free of charge. We'll talk more about the offerings as well, but the DE courses are offered in Gen Ed, so that would mean our Core 4, English, Math, Science, and Social Science, as well as CTE classes. And we see many students actually combining those programs to really focus on Gen Ed that'll transfer to a 4-year school, as well as CTE to give them an early look at something they may want to pursue later on. Next slide. Okay, so what we have are the contract classes at the buildings in APS. Early on college is something that was started a few years back, and it was geared to really fill in the blanks for classes that are right now not able to be offered at the APS or really any high school. And so what we do is allow students to take those through this early online program. They're asynchronous virtual classes only geared for juniors and seniors. So our younger students can kind of start in our buildings, but the older students are the ones that really have the opportunity to do this because we see them as really kind of at that point being more focused on knowing what they do and knowing how they want to get there. So classes like this we'll see are like public speaking classes. We have some social science classes like psychology and sociology, economics, that type of thing. So things that right now aren't DE offerings in the school building, the students can take those through early online. Early on college is tuition free and it will remain that way, but this is where we are seeing some fees for books. That program was kicked in just this fall, so we're kind of learning to navigate it and working one-on-one with students to see what's going to be the best option to pay for those books. Are there rentals and options that are cheaper, or should a student buy the book through the college? So right now, this week, we're actually working with students to see what's going to be best for them. But again, tuition free in terms of what would be normally like a $200 per credit class, $600 realistically being offered free to students in this EOC program. We also have independent DE, so that differs a bit from contract DE. Independent are classes that students will take on a NOVA campus. What we see here, some of them are online, some of them students will actually go to campus, some are in a hybrid mode, but at this point, those classes do have to be paid for by the family. So we tell the student, especially if they want to take a class in the summer, the time and the money are something to be considered with the family. So we recommend that students kind of look at this, plan on this early, and talk to their parents about it. So these independent classes would be geared for a student that perhaps wanted to get a little bit ahead in a math or technology class, someone perhaps that was looking at a world language that's not offered where we are. So we, again, work with the students very carefully to make sure they're making good choices. And I will work with them here in the building, but also we will see some NOVA counselors assisting with that as well. So they have really a lifeline here in high school as well as right on the campus. Next slide. Okay, so kind of looking 9th through 12th, how they would get ready. So what we're seeing this year, again, some expanded offerings for our 9th grade. They can take a web design class, very first time this year that we have freshmen in there, and then some other classes being added to our choices for 9th grade. That's a dual enrolled music appreciation class that students are able to take if qualified. And we're also looking at TV production. So a way for a student to kind of start early, especially if they're looking at a longer term degree, how they can start building up not just credits, but also experience in terms of what the DE courses actually require for them, the communication they need, and really learn to kind of balancing that schedule out so they're not really crunching in and overloading everything once they get to junior year. Taking a look at the CTE elective fair tomorrow, I'll be there for that. We'll have a DE table, so anyone that wants to pop in will have plenty of opportunity for questions. It's actually really good that my time with ATAC matched right near advising week, because we're getting a lot of students coming in to ask about what's best to take, how they can form a degree. So again, happy to meet with those students either one-on-one or in small groups to see what's best. In fact, I have a group of 4 freshmen that have been coming in since October, getting ready. So we really encourage that for everybody to get started early with that. Along with me, it's super important for students to meet with their school counselor, because at Nova, we look at that student as a high school student first and Nova student second. So really want to make sure that you're meeting requirements for graduation as well as for Nova. So we really keep a team approach between the school counselor, myself, and the family. As I mentioned, you'll see that eligibility does have to do with GPA. So we do recommend that students do their best with that. No pressure per se, but knowing that it is a numerical GPA that's really set up by the state and administration at Nova. So even though a student might have a 323, and we've seen some sad situations with this, a 323, a fabulous essay, a statement that they might want to make, it does have to stick to those numerical qualifiers. So you do want to encourage your student to do the best they can to really maybe make that cut. If for some reason they don't, once a student becomes a junior, we can look at PSAT test, which makes a big difference for some students. But in those early years, it is a black and white GPA numerical issue. So we do encourage students to really take things seriously right from the beginning. Next slide. All right, 10th grade, this is our population that we're seeing a lot of visitors this week from the 10th grade, because they're planning to get ready for 11th grade. Now in 10th grade, we do have a lot of students start to dabble in the math classes. Students that are qualified for pre-calculus can start in 10th grade, especially if they're interested in really building up a big math resume to go for a degree like a computer science or a laboratory science degree. In 10th grade, again, they want to work with me as well as their counselor to see what's going to work best for them to take. And if for some reason they were not able to take something, perhaps look at an independent offering if the family is behind that. We really, at this point, want to communicate with students, to communicate with teachers. And as Michelle mentioned earlier, we had the DE Fair last week. So they can go sit one-on-one with a teacher and really get an idea of what's expected with that. The counselors, as we talked about earlier, have also really gotten a good presentation together where they have videos of what some classes are about, student remarks on experiences they've had in classes, so a student can really get a good idea of what's expected. Again, though, we really want to make sure that that student communicates themselves so they can really get that feel that, is this for me? And if it's not, what are alternatives? So we do want everybody to make their own decisions with that. Really important also in the 10th grade is that students know that there are pre and co-requisite courses for especially the math and science. And the reason we want to do this, again, these are state and college rules that do, for example, require that a student has to be in pre-calculus or higher with the physics class. Again, a student can be fabulous in physics, love it, have been doing it for fun, but if they don't have that pre or co-req, we have to make that decision. So again, just to know that there are policies that we really can't change that students have to be ready for. Big thing that we see is the overload policy. In fact, I believe it was last year, the speaker at graduation even talked about how many times she went in for overload policy. That basically means that a student can take 18 credits a semester, 18 college credits. If they want to take more than that, they have to make sure that they've completed 12 credits at Nova before. So important, they start early and with a 3-point average. So again, starting early, but also doing well with their grades. If they find that they're ready to request an overload, I'll work with them to connect them with our director of dual enrollment, who at this point makes the approvals or denials for overloads. Again, striving to do their best, knowing what the eligibility is, knowing that it's important to communicate with your teachers to make sure you're getting a good professional recommendation for that class as well. We see a lot of students say, oh, well, my friends are taking it, it's going to be fun. Yeah, but you want to make sure that you're talking with the teacher to know what's expected to make sure it's the right class for you. Next slide. Okay, 11th grade, super important for balance because this is where we do see kids coming in for the first time taking the core four, all with DE, which usually right off the bat will total up to 13 DE credits. If that student takes a CTE class, that takes them to 16 or 17. So we're right there near that overload. So, and looking at that, that would be what a full-time student that perhaps lives on a college campus at a four-year school would be taking. So we really want to make sure that they know the time and energy that's required for those particular classes. When we look at the campus rule, we look at for every 3 hours in class, 3 credit hours, you can expect 6 hours of homework. So I think it's important that students see the time, especially if they're active in other clubs and activities, but also realize that time might not be an essay that's due tomorrow. Time might be a paper that's assigned in August on the first day of school and due in November. So looking at how you're going to manage your time in these next few months. It might not be a set day a week that a teacher says. It might be your own style and knowing how you're going to set up a calendar to be ready for this. Again, knowing the 18 credits and the reason why we have the 18 credits, and knowing that when they go over that, and if they're feeling like they want to add more things, how they would go about doing that. I had a student this year said, well, can I just take the class and ask permission later? Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, he asked permission and got it, but students do need to know that we do have steps that they have to go to. Communicating regularly and using time in Archer's lunch and at study hall. Most of our DE teachers are thrilled to meet with students. They'll sit at lunch and have lunch while the student is there. They'll use their Archer's period. But again, as we've looked at earlier, the student needs to kind of start everything. In the college world, the teacher might not stop and say, hey, come see me. That student needs to say, I'm really having difficulty here. When can we meet? So important that they kind of get rid of the awkward thing about approaching a faculty member and just say, I need help. What can I do? Important as well, if a student knows they're a little bit nervous about a class coming in, that they can use Nova's tutorial and academic support services. And that's something you can start right when school starts. So if, for example, a student maybe has never been a history student, but knows they want to try the class, we would recommend getting started really early with that and doing all the summer work as well and working with Nova, even if you have questions on that material. As long as you're a Nova D student, you're a Nova student as well and able to use the resources. Finally, using campus resources, if you have an IEP or 504, you would need to get accommodations from Nova as well as APS for your DE class. That's a process that can also be started really, really early. And we work with you to connect with the campus counselor who then will reach out to the student individually. Now, what we look at are most of the meetings are virtual between that student counselor. The student can invite the parent in, but really important that, again, we look at that student kind of starting the process on their own, running the meeting with the counselor on their own, and bringing the parent in for support if needed. Next slide. Okay, and maintaining success. This is where we'll see a lot of questions coming in about what schools transfer dual enrollment. We are seeing more and more DE questions coming along with AP and IB in the college tours. So the earlier you start with your tours, I would certainly start asking questions about DE for that. Many schools will take it as direct credit. Some will take it as what we call advanced standing, meaning you might not get credit, but you'd be able to go into a higher level for the course. And others have distinctions, whether the class was taken as a high school class or as a quote unquote campus-based class, which would be something like early online college. So it becomes a different vocabulary. We would want your student to really start working with us in career and counseling at ACC, but also with those admissions reps to get some good answers for that. Again, looking at the balance with time, because once that student gets to be senior, they have the admissions process sitting on top of everything else. So again, to make sure you're allowing for time and energy to do that. and looking again at Nova's resources. Super important that so much are virtual, so many can be done at different times after school. So if a student really tries, the campus tutors and counselors there will really try to work with you as well. So we're here, but again, you will see a focus on students starting the conversation as opposed to us bringing a student in. Next slide. Transitioning, and I also realized I missed something on the last one. A lot of people will say, well, I have an associate's degree. Do I get to be a junior? We will ask you to apply as a freshman to the school, because what the four-year schools want to see is a compilation of their class of, let's say, 20, 30. And what they'll do in that case is they want you and or your student to be living in a dorm with students of the same age, doing freshman and welcome activities with a peer group. So even though you may start out as quote unquote a freshman, socially you'll be a freshman, but academically you could be a sophomore, junior based on your credits. And again, the rationale is with those four-year schools, they really want you to have a peer group and they want to form a class of people in that same age range. Important that as you go through the process, you stay in touch, if possible, with an admissions rep so they can give you little ideas along the way. For example, for early online college, a lot of students will start to ask, do I want a world history or a religions of the world? What would be best at your school? So good to have that lifeline and to really communicate. Once it's asked for, and we're seeing them asked for in the admissions process as well as final, to know how to get your transcript from Nova, to be prepared when you go to your freshman orientation that you're carrying that transcript, just to make sure you're not going to be duplicating any classes. If anybody's got a student that's been through a freshman orientation, there's hundreds of people in 5-minute sections trying to get it done. So the most prepared you can be is the best for that. Keep in mind always that you're a Nova student. So if you need to come back with permission from your four-year school to take classes in the summer, you're welcome to do that. And also stay in touch with us in the college and career office, because we learn from the students that have graduated and gone before. So there are particular schools I can tell you that take everything well, schools that will only take non-high school based, schools that will look at your academic status along the way. So in terms of what the grades were. So we kind of learn that. It's anecdotal, but we can at least put you in the right direction. And again, encourage you to get a lifeline at that school that you can talk to for more information. Next slide. And that's it, but I'm happy to look at questions. I know it's a lot of information, but I know that Stephanie will have this slide deck, and I'm happy to answer things for your student at the Career Center or with you guys tonight or at a later time, whatever works best.
Thank you, Ms. Magro. I will just open it up for questions. I'm going to just brag on you a little bit before I open for questions. I've been bothering Ms. Magro this week for questions on data. And for last year, class of 2024, I believe you had 13 associate's degrees at Arlington Tech, and then 20 certificates of general studies, which equaled 3,173 college credits for the class of 2024. And we've computed based on the cost of credits that that's $694,000 worth of college credits, which a huge testament to Dr. Van Leer and Mrs. Magro. I think the college advising that you give the students and helping to plan for those associate's degrees and those certificates is amazing, and super grateful for it. I will turn it over for questions. Tima, you want to jump in?
Yes. Hi, Miss Magro. If a student wants to make sure they don't have a big load of 6 DE classes, I'm taking that it would be able to do one of them over the summer. And how would we apply for that?
Okay, if the family, was willing to make the time and financial commitment, we start working with them really early. So this year we've heard that February 17th is like the opening day for summer registration at Nova. And we really encourage people to do it early because a lot of times we'll get people from JMU and Tech living up here over the summer, taking classes. So a lot of things fill. So for example, I've had some students that want to take the public speaking class, and that's one that for some reason people will come from other schools because they're like, oh, I don't want to do that at my own school. So we want to make sure that our guys get those slots in that. So the process goes that we would look and kind of see a section that worked. There's paperwork that the student, parent, and counseling team need to fill out. Once that's all done, we send it to Nova, and then one of our admissions reps will work with the student to make sure they get set up, transcripts are set, and that they get registered for the class. So important to do that early because a lot of the summer classes will start like end of May. So we want to make sure that you're ready to go with that. So when that class starts, even though it's at the end of high school, you're ready to go. We also have classes that go July to mid-August that some students will opt for just to be able to take a few weeks between that end of school and summer. So the earlier that a student can register, the better it's going to be because you have just more choices to look at.
And typically, how many weeks are these courses in the summer?
Usually 6.
So,
the way
and the 6 would cover like what's equivalent to 1 year then, but it's done in a more condensed fashion.
It's usually just it equals a college semester per se. So if it's like the speech class we'll use, if that were to meet, let's say during a 15-week period during the semester, the student would probably go like to 1 3-hour class, looking at it that way, 3 hours a week. In the summer, they would probably need to do 6 hours a week. So if it were like a Zoom class, it would probably be maybe 2 nights a week from 6 to 10. If it was an online class, the work would just kind of be condensed in to see to equal those contact hours.
Can I just follow up on that for just a second? I just want to make sure that it's obviously most important to us that students are getting their high school credits that they need to graduate before we worry about what college credits they're doing. So the core classes students still will be needing to take during the academic year. So English, math, science, and social studies, you have to make sure that you take with us in order to be able to get the APS credit. You wouldn't be able to get APS credit for taking something over the summer for that.
Yeah, we usually recommend the filler classes like the speech class. There's like an extra humanities. Some kids
Or
have
like language classes, for example.
We've had students that, and again, as Michelle said, this would be for college credits only. If they have a language that's not offered at ACC, we've seen some students expressing an interest in upper level French classes, students that for some reason have placed at a different level. Some of them will also look at that to take those. But again, for college credit only. If a student's looking for a combo of high school and college credit, they do have to clear it through, at this point, Dr. Wilmore, to make sure they can get that. So that's why we kind of encourage those classes that normally aren't offered through APS to take during the summer.
Okay. And we can like I can make an appointment with you and my daughter so that we can like go over what she's doing. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't have an overload. Our idea was to do a non-core class over the summer. So, but okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And we would want, to have the school counselor involved as well. But yeah, I really like meeting with the students and parents together, just again, to kind of establish what they're looking for and to kind of have a lifeline going. It's so cool at graduation to see some of these kids that you've met, in 9th grade walking across the stage.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll make an appointment.
You're welcome. Anytime. Any other questions?
And there's one question in the chat. Sorry, if I can jump on. The one question in the chat is, when will the course offerings be shared with students? And I think that when counselors start their presentations next Wednesday is when they'll start giving course cards to students to look at.
Yeah, I know, what is it? I think the 10th grade, rising 10th grade goes next week. So yeah, they're ready to go. And a lot of the kids are coming in getting information now so they can be prepared to have things go, really go smoothly once they meet with their counselor one-on-one.
Yeah, and Kim, I just checked. Kim said that they said they would be online this week, but I don't see them. I just checked their online site. It's all ready for them to post it. They just haven't posted yet, so I'm not they should be posted any day now.
And Ms. Magro, I had a question for you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you find students have when they're taking DE classes or when they're working towards an associate's or a certificate?
Okay, good question. Definitely the time that the DE classes, once things really kick in and registration is gone and kids are officially in, the late work policy for most is non-existent. So the students really have to start working to meet the deadlines and communicating with their teachers. Coming in on the day it's due saying I didn't have time won't work with the DE classes. So really, planning in advance, looking at a calendar, using free time. A lot of people, like, for example, for the EOC class, they're like, when can I study for that? That's something they have to work out. Do they lock in on Thursday nights between 7 and 10? And this is my night. So really kind of looking at the time, taking it seriously, communicating with the teachers, not just saying, I can't turn in the work, it's late, but, help me out. I know that I only have 2 weeks to do that. Help me manage my time for this. So really important that they kind of let go of procrastination and let go of that awkward, oh, I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to stand out, because you really do have to advocate for yourselves. So that's really a lot of the issues I've seen that really have to do with communication, and that just not taking the time, the deadlines, and the no late work policy very seriously. It's an adjustment, but it's something that, the teachers will say that better for them to kind of learn that lesson here in Arlington in that safe environment than going where you're paying a ton of tuition and the student being in a class with 500 people and the professor really not knowing, who that student is and just knowing a number and a grade. So really important to kind of take this as a learning experience for what's coming next. Anybody else? And it's funny, as Steph, you mentioned, so many times Marlene, Steph's daughter, will come in, oh, sorry to bother you. It's like, no, you're not bothering us. Please come in. Well, we don't hear from people. We're like, what's going on? So we do want to make sure that they're asking us whenever they have a question, because if we don't know, we're going to point them in the direction of someone on campus or at a four-year school that would know. So super important that they advocate for themselves and communicate.
Yeah, and I found with the late policy, I feel like for our 16, 17-year-olds, they're also like testing how far they can go. So in their APS classes, like teachers might give some leniency or they might extend dates. But when they're taking the DE classes or some of the early online classes, and then a professor says they're not accepting it and they get a 0, it takes just one or two times for the students to realize, oh, I can't do that here. And I need to turn everything in on time. So I feel like it's also a muscle that gets stronger as they take additional DE classes.
Absolutely. And with the accommodations too, we recommend to get that started early. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't need to do that. I've got this. And okay, and if you do, that's fabulous. But that accommodation, MOA, memorandum of accommodation, is there in case it is needed. So we recommend to get that going, because the campus counselors have a heavy load of their DE students as well as their campus students. So we recommend to kind of make that contact really, really early, so that once the school year gets started, you're right there. You know what things you might have extra time for. You know what things you might have accommodations in terms of like preferred seating or small group, but that you know it early and are ready to go with it early.
And I don't want to keep everyone too long. Thank you so much, Ms. Magro, for even staying as long as you have. Just a quick question on the types of associate's degrees that you find our students taking, because I had a misconception that students could only get computer science associate's degrees when they came in. So could you just share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And computer science is the one that kind of jumps out because it's created as such that a student might be able to earn that without leaving the building, without having to take any early online classes or any independent classes. So that's why that one gets a lot of PR. And that's why, through the years, we tend to have higher numbers with that because it's not a lot of outside work. They just blend in their day to day with those DE classes. What we're starting to see more of lately are the associate in science degrees. These are students that are looking long term to most likely be in maybe the medical field or in some sort of, biological or physical science research. A lot of them will have to take one science class on their own. So perhaps that's the summer between junior and senior year or sophomore and junior. The only ones that we've seen be able to have a bit more advantage on that might not have to do that are the students that start pre-calc in the 10th grade. So they would do pre-calc, calc, and then advanced math. So we are seeing more kids coming in with either the math and or the willingness to know that I have to take a class this summer. I'm ready to commit to that. So that we're seeing a lot of associate in science students from that. We're also seeing a lot of general studies, and general studies is kind of a make your own degree where we see some of the students that are looking at the CTE classes, combining those with gen ed to formulate that degree. Some of the students in TV production will use their TV credits towards something like that. And some of the students that have kind of formulated a pre-med look in terms of taking a medical terminology and looking maybe at the anatomy class will kind of formulate their degree based on that. So it's a good way for students that have really looked at a lot of CTE and kind of tried to combine it together to form a degree plan. They will a lot of times go for the general studies. And then finally, it's a little bit more outside work, but we see students going for liberal arts. And liberal arts is big because it does reward students that are in DE world language with us. So a liberal arts degree requires a student to go to intermediate world language. So if a student takes the DE Spanish class, for example, they've met that requirement. So it really kind of puts them in a good position. They do have to do some extra classes because a lot of times those require maybe a different humanities, different social science, because again, it's a liberal arts degree. But if they plan early enough, and this is why it's super important, if a student's eligible to start classes in the 10th grade, to do a class like that DE music appreciation, or to start, building up to where they can take that DE language later, that puts them in a good position for liberal arts. And that tends to usually be kids that are looking long-term. I'm almost 90% with people that want to be lawyers and attorneys afterwards. Some that are looking, again, more at like world politics and international relations, but a lot of pre-law go for the liberal arts degree.
So I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to get to a specific question. As we are thinking about college and college applications, and you've been doing this work for a long time, what advantages or disadvantages do you see when our students are applying for their four-year degrees, when it comes to having DE credits or having an associate's or a certificate?
The main advantage is certainly rigor of curriculum. With admissions kind of going so many different ways these days, and some being test optional, and some just, with thousands of applications, and it's hard for officers to discern. They really look at rigor of curriculum and the fact that a student took the most rigorous selection of classes that were offered at the high school. And for us, those are the DE classes. So I think that really helps a student to show that they've really taken that extra challenge, be it for maybe 2 classes or be it for a full degree, that they're really choosing a rigorous option to look at. What we see on the downside is that a lot of students will read the guaranteed admissions agreements and think, oh, I've got a degree, I'm automatically into UVA. Those admissions agreements are geared for students that graduate high school, start a community college for 2 years, and then move for 2 years. So a more quote unquote adult population, for lack of a better term. So we do want to make sure that That's why we push that you're applying as a freshman and that those credits can come in later. What we also, advise people to do is look and as a family make a choice. We had a student that received a certificate and was in really good shape for both UVA and Virginia Tech. She was also accepted to Duke that wasn't going to take anything because they're Duke and can be selective that way. And the student chose to attend Duke and repeat some of the classes she had taken. Basically said she came in knowing that they were going to be easy because she had taken them before, but she wouldn't have received the credit. So again, family decision as to what's going to be best for that student.
Thank you so much. And we have Kim's specific question about the workload outside of class for DE physics.
Okay. The way that they run DE physics, normally we do a lot of fall and spring classes. So English 111, Comp 1 in the fall, Comp 2 in the spring. Physics spans throughout the whole year. So it's one large 4 college credit class throughout the year. So the class is allowed to move a little more slowly than, let's say, English and history, because they do have 4 credits throughout a year as opposed to 6 throughout the year. That course also has a lab as well as lecture component. So it does dabble into some days being Dr. Miller lecturing the group to others being lab type of work. So again, kind of stretched out from what I've seen for students, they manage their time really, really well in the class. He also a lot of times will reinforce the pre-calculus principles that they're taking in the math class. So that makes it a really good experience for the students. So I think the DE Physics 1 is a good choice to kind of get used to the lab science, the lecture combo, and stretch it out over a year. We do recommend, however, that you look at that relating to your major. So, for example, the liberal arts major, DE Physics counts as your lab science. For computer science, it does count as an approved elective because computer science wants a heavier level physics if a student opts for that, or biology. So we offer biology at ACC. So our computer science majors are taking physics in their junior year and bio as seniors.
Thank you so much, Ms. Magro. I highly recommend scheduling time with Ms. Magro with your child. We've had lots of fun Zoom calls where Mrs. Magro is sitting next to my kiddo and I'm at home and we're talking through potential classes, different types of professors. We're rethinking class choices. I think we've met maybe 3 or 4 times each year over the past 2 years, especially. So it's definitely a journey, and I think our students are really lucky to have you, Ms. Magro, on that journey. And I cannot thank you enough, all of you, for staying till 9:34 p.m. I normally end early, but I think this was worth every single minute, and we're so appreciative of your time.
Well, thank you. I will be out of the office next week, but back on the 3rd. So if you want to reach out as far as an appointment's concerned, we'll be looking realistically at that week of the 3rd to get organized.
Thank you so much. Dr. Van Leer, was there something you wanted to add?
Not at all. Just a big thank you. And thank you, Steph, for tonight.
All right. Thank you for hosting us. Yeah, this was a great group.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
You too.
And
Bye-bye. Have a good one.